Hey guys, Tim here with the Juice Compound. It's Monday, we're talking programming, and specifically today, I want to do a little recap of a programming cycle for two of our athletes, Steven and Alexa. They just finished the national team selection for their sport. Their sport's Taekwondo, and I want to go over how an individualized approach to this helped each of them perform really well. Steven made the national team, and he's a many-time national team member. Alexa was her first national team selection, and she actually made it to the finals and made the B team. And so, even though it's the same sport, they even train really similar. This part of it is going to be really different. So, we're talking broad strokes here. I'm not going to get into any exercise selection of what they did and rep ranges specifically, but kind of the big picture of how this works and why an individualized approach for your sport is so critical at the top. With any individualized program, the first thing to do is who first, right? Steven and Alexa are two totally different athletes. Steven is a heavyweight, probably 6'3", 6'4", 250 pounds, if not more. Alexa is probably 5'5", 115 pounds. Okay, so that's the first thing to take into account. Second, Steven just finished a world competition called the Grand Prix about a month before. So that makes navigating through this next part, he's not going to get a full training cycle for his team selection, whereas his competitors are. But also, he's going to have a bunch of international competitions after this, really similar to an NFL season. So that changes the training we're going to have to do coming up. Where Alexa had months and months to progress in her training, we got to do a lot of kind of like just beat up work months out to get her balance for her sport, because she is changing from the training to train phase to training to win now. It was her first national team selection, so that part of her career is going to shift, and that has to do now with training schedule, demand we can place on her central nervous system to respond back and bounce back quickly. So there's a lot of changes that are going to make for her. So we had about 4 or 5 months to balance her out before we did this kind of 8-week cycle to get her ready for her selection. Final thing to take into account, Steven had a ruptured Achilles a couple years ago, and as a heavyweight athlete, that is a big thing to watch out for. So a lot of his conditioning was cyclical to try and get him ready, make sure he's primed, but you can't hurt him at this level. If you're a strength and conditioning coach out there and you're dinging your athletes up at all, that's like the big sin we got to avoid, right? No one's going to win anything if they're bashed up from the thing that's supposed to make them better. While Alexa has no old injury issues. So starting off, just as far as the overall volume, Alexa has a much higher workload relative to Steven's. I mean, for other sports it may not be, but I'm talking about them balanced for their sport and where they're at. Because she's younger, she's going to bounce back faster between training sessions than Steven. I mean, he's not old, but he's been around for a long time in his sport, so he is more balanced than she's going to be. So I don't need to just crush him constantly. My thing for him actually is to make sure, peak him up for that world competition, and then in between, we actually really only did a few training sessions. I just need to make sure there was touches on his training throughout the time, and that he was ready to go mentally with set. Not too high of stress, not too low of recovery, but to get him to the place he can do his work. Where Alexa, I had her humming pretty high for a while. You can ask her. There was days she was like, I can't do this part today. I am beat. And we're like, you have to do this. Because again, when they're younger, they have a higher arc of where they're going to go. So we want to kind of capitalize on that as much as we can in broad strokes, of course. Second would be the week before is super critical. That's the second thing I want to talk about, that kind of peaking and tapering week. For Steven, all the hard work was done, like we said. He did almost nothing the week of team trials. Got a text from him that night that he was in better shape than everyone in his competition. He felt fine, and it was mainly just navigating through the fact that he had a big competition first, a bunch of competitions coming up, where all his competitors just really have this one, and they can focus on this and peak towards it, kind of like Alexa had, where when you're at the top, you're in a funny place. But so we need to, again, navigate him through that to maximize his fights over the weekend, but make sure we're not taking away. He's not so exhausted now from me getting him ready for the team that come the international season, he can't fight at all. He's got adrenal fatigue or something really crappy that's keeping him down. Meanwhile, Alexa's going to have a little more time to recuperate after this, and we're going to ramp her back up pretty hard again here for a minute, just because where she's at again for her, because it's individualized, she can take it and she's adapting really well for this. Some really big takeaways for this. Obviously, the individualized approach, I think, helped each of them get the most out of where they were at. We base it always on the previous plan, meaning what I had them do in the months before was affecting the final preparations. So we, start where the competition is. We want to work backwards based on, hey, for Steven, I knew he had all this stuff coming up in the early part of the year. So we got a lot of our kind of deep strength and conditioning work done in the fall. And now it's just, again, think of an athlete in the middle of the NFL season. They're just, making sure they're healthy. Some priming work. Again, a lot of airdyne for him because I want to make sure we're not messing up the Achilles, not messing up anything that's going to take away from his sport training. Where Alexa can handle a little more the mixed modal conditioning stuff for where she's at right now. That'll probably change in the future for her. But again, that's why it's individualized, because when the time's ready, we'll progress her and she'll keep ramping up. And I think this is a big part of what I'm seeing now in a lot of the sports with the coaches not having this plan based on what their different, macro, meso, microcycles were before. So they end up pushing far too much at the end. I'm getting updates from other athletes that, they're doing these 2-hour sessions 2 days before the competition, or a week out they're doing, and it's not for their sport. It's just that they're just getting beat up doing, something like a 3-rep power clean followed by like a bunch of clean and jerks and burpees and a Metcon. And at that point, that's actually making you worse for your sport because you're taking away energy needed to do your sport really well. Okay? At a certain time, like back in the fall with Steven, yeah, we're doing things similar to that. Not that exactly. We're going to do it better. But things that maybe make it so training's a little harder when he's kicking. But when we get time to where it's really close, you've got to put all your energy into your sport. And when we're taking it away, now we know we're having an athlete not come into competition with 100% of their abilities. And that's not going to lead to their best result, right? At the end, athletes, they're not going to be resting. There's no chance for any super compensation or kind of peaking effects that are going to be happening. The coach kind of freaks out, and so when they freak out, they push hard a little too much, and the athlete's too beat. And when the effects of winning between first and second place are a few percent, this stuff really matters, and that's why we take it so seriously. The differences at this level are minimal, and it affects everything. So that's kind of the broad strokes. I want to get in more later with some of the kind of the rep ranges or exercise selection or tempos or stuff we're doing. But for right now, that was kind of the big overall plan we had for them at their national selection. Individualized, different for every person, different for every sport, and it's an ongoing thing. So that's all I got for Monday. I know it was a lot, but hopefully there's some good stuff in there for you guys. Thanks.